Hello, can you hear me? Yes? Yes.
You might need the microphone a little bit closer.
Closer?
Yeah, just a bit higher.
Like this?
I think that's better.
Yes? Like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you okay with it?
Uh,
It can actually, it can work. I also hate it because it messes your hair.
yeah, well, with long hair
How is it? Hvordan er det nu, Isabella? It's always, I always get it
Yeah,
the
you
wrong
need the two
direction.
hooks around your ears.
But this on the head? Does that
No,
need to be on the head?
Let me see.
typically behind
Oh,
the
okay.
neck.
It would be like this, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Is this what it's supposed to be, or is it the other way around?
Okay, well.
Let's see if you can live with this. Yeah, because it doesn't do your hair.
I think I'll do it like this. Like that. I think that's alright.
That is
Hmm?
good.
Hmm?
It
Yeah.
looks good.
Yeah.
So what else then? Oh yeah.
5. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. May I please have your attention? Thank you. Now, welcome to our third and last keynote speech, featuring, as they say, Sandra Hale, who has come all the way from Australia. Thank you for taking the time and effort, Sharon. Sandra. We're extremely sorry. I'm yesterday too. Well, we're extremely pleased to have you here. So Sandra Hale is actually Miss Community Interpreting, really. She has a long career in that field, both as an interpreter, a trainer, and a researcher. She's currently Professor of Interpreting and Translation at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, and her books, The Discourse of Court Interpreting and Community Interpreting, simply, they are widely known and used. Community interpreting is a model example of a subfield within translation studies that has been expanding in recent years, and which has pushed and extended the very boundaries of translation studies. When interpreting studies and I were young, in the early 90s, community interpreting was small and ill-regarded. Today it's huge and widely believed to be important. Sandra's address carries the title Moving Boundaries Through Community Interpreting Research, and it will focus on how academia, through methodologically advanced research, has impacted on the field of practice, not only on interpreters, but also on interpreting users and policymakers. So there's yet another boundary or barrier that is currently being torn down, the one between research and practice. So Sandra, we're looking forward to your speech. Please come forward.
Can you hear me? Yes, clear? All right. Thank you. The room looks much bigger from this side. Thank you very much to the organisers, especially to Hale, who has been so great throughout not only this conference, but since from the time that she invited me, which was, I think, about 2 years ago or something like that. Yes. So I'm very, very happy to be here and very happy to have gone to so many excellent presentations. And I also thank you all for staying behind to the very last session. I didn't know how many people would be left. Okay, so Hale already introduced my topic about moving boundaries through community interpreting research. So just by way of introduction, those of you who know about community interpreting will know that interpreting research is relatively recent when we compare it to conference interpreting research or to translation research as a whole. And it dates back to the late 1980s, early 1990s, and with most of the work, I think, carried out throughout the 2000s and continuing on in a much greater way now. Now, the bulk of the research into community interpreting or public service interpreting, as it is known in other places, was on or has been on court and medical interpreting. And the main methods that have been used, and I can see that they continue to be used, are discourse analysis with naturally occurring data and ethnographic methods such as interviews and focus groups and observations, and using a descriptive qualitative approach. And I have been one of the people who have used these methods and continue to use these methods, and I'll tell you more about that. Most of the research traditionally has used relatively small samples. So case studies, one case of a court case or a medical consultation and so on. And I think most of the time, traditionally, including myself, these studies have been carried out by single researchers from the field itself. So this is a characteristic of community interpreting research, that a lot of practitioners became educators and then researchers. And I'm one of those examples, one of the statistics. So I was a practitioner first, a student first, then a practitioner, then a trainer, and then a researcher. And most of the research has been done among people who now we call ourselves interpreting studies experts, I suppose, or linguists. So these studies and the results of these studies have been instrumental in the development of community interpreting, both as a discipline and also in informing the practice through the training of interpreters. And in different countries we have different training regimes where these results have been used, some more than others. In Australia, you may know that we've been training community interpreters for many years, and I am from the first cohort of those trained community interpreters back in the 80s, and more are being trained, and also we have a lot of international students. So far, up until that time, community interpreting research, which has looked at the complexities of interpreting in this very different setting from conference interpreting, which is face-to-face and dialogic, or maybe sometimes even more than that, interactive, interprofessional, those complexities have caused or have led to more research questions. And this has crossed the boundaries into the practice by informing the training of community interpreters for the past 2 or 3 decades. And there are some examples of researchers who have been instrumental in this phase of community interpreting research, training and practice, and that whole cycle that is interconnected. Now this presentation will describe some of my recent research studies. So I've chosen 3. I have others that I'm not going to talk about, but I've chosen 3 because of lack of time, obviously, but also to show you about 3 legal interpreting situations which have been researched. And I will talk about how these studies have crossed methodological, disciplinary and professional boundaries. And the research studies that I'm going to talk about, 2 to do with court interpreting, 1 with police interpreting, used mixed methods. And during this conference we saw people doing qualitative and quantitative, and sometimes arguing which one is better than the other. And so I'll show you now how these 2 types have been used in these projects. And the researchers involved in these projects have been from various fields, so obviously from interpreting and linguistics fields, but also from law, from psychology, sociology, and others from health and so on, using large samples. So this is where we're becoming a little bit different from what had been done before, what I had done before in particular. So with these studies we have gone beyond the description and into the analysis of the effects of interpreting on all of the participants. So I will give you an overview of 3 interdisciplinary projects. So the first one is called Interpreters in Court, funded by the Australian Research Council, a linkage project, which means that it has to have industry partners, and I'll tell you who they have been or who they were. And Interpreting in Police Settings, that's another funded project by the FBI. When I say this, people don't believe me, but but it's true. And the other one is another ARC linkage project about deaf citizens and jurors. So here we've got a photo of the first project, of part of the first project, because all of these projects are multifaceted and using, as I said, qualitative and quantitative methods. Now, one issue to do with experimental research, which has been raised a lot here, is the issue of ecological validity. So you can see here that we are in a real court with a person at the back that looks like a real judge, but was an actor. And these 2 figures at the front were also actors, and I'll tell you more about that and the reason why we had actors. This is the composition of the researchers, and this is an important detail. It's one of the main points that I'm trying to make. So we've got a sociologist, a criminologist, a psychologist, lawyer, and then interpreting, both spoken and sign language interpreting experts, including Jemina Napier, whom you know and is here today. And then we have partner organisations, the Australasian Institute of Judicial Administration, Department of Attorney General and Justice of different states around Australia, an architect firm, you wonder why, interpreter and translator agencies, and the Federation of Deaf Society Sign Language Communications, and ICE Design, who design, both the architects and these ones have designed a lot of the courts in Australia. So you can see that by bringing all these people together, we're not only bringing a lot of expertise together from different fields and learning an incredible amount of information and ways to do things from each other, but also getting the linkage partners, the industry partners, who are also learning about interpreting issues, about the role of the interpreter, about the needs of the interpreter, and so on. So these have been extremely important facets of these projects that go beyond the research questions that were the original motivation for doing the research. So I'll just give you a quick overview, because these projects are huge. But the main research questions, which were answered through the experiment, there were many research questions that were answered through the ethnographic part of the research, the questionnaires, the interviews, the focus groups. But through the experimental part were these things. Was there any difference between the monolingual and the two interpreted conditions regarding jurors' concentration, understanding and recollection of the case facts? Was there any difference in the jurors' perception of the accused between the three conditions? And was there any difference in the conviction rate between the three conditions? Now, in order to answer those very specific questions, we had to mount a whole case based on a real case. And it wasn't only once. We repeated it many times at different times of the day with over 400 jurors. And that's the reason why we had actors, because the whole script was scripted, including the interpretation, so that the accuracy of interpreting was not an issue, was not a variable. So we wanted to check these other variables, so consecutive interpreting versus simultaneous, and the time of day, and how that impacted on the jurors. So, as I said, included a lot of other ethnographic methods before that, which informed the rest of the study, including the mock trial. It was a real courtroom acted out by professional actors to minimize the variation. It was repeated multiple times with 449 jurors and 3 conditions, as I said. Now, the main results were very interesting. What we found was the conviction rate did not differ significantly between the jurors who assessed the monolingual case without an interpreter and those who assessed the bilingual cases with the same interpreter in either mode. So the person who acted out the part of the accused was always the accused. First he spoke in English and then in Spanish through the interpreter. So that was a very good result, because through very accurate interpreting, and by accurate I mean accurate in terms of content and manner, so the actor was trained to interpret not just the content but to copy the manner of the delivery, we found that there was no significant difference in the conviction rate. The time of the day made a difference to the jurors' level of concentration and their ability to recall the facts of the case, and the consecutive interpreting mode tended to distract them more in the afternoon. So that was an issue that I think it's intuitive. There were no significant differences, this is very important, at all between the monolingual condition and the simultaneous mode. And this seems to indicate that in order to place the non-English speaker in the same position as an English speaker, the most appropriate mode would be the simultaneous, because there was no difference in the two. So it was the closest to the monolingual situation. But there were significant differences between the monolingual condition and the consecutive mode, with the consecutive mode eliciting more positive perceptions of the accused. Now remember, the consecutive mode was with the interpreter, as I showed you in that picture, the interpreter in view, and so we suppose that the interpreter's good image reflected positively on the accused. It could be the opposite way if the interpreter did not have a professional image and was not introduced by the judge as a professional who was trained and with a good status. So what are the applications of this study? As I said, you'll have to wait for the rest of the results because we're publishing all of them. Court design, that's one of the applications. After this study and disseminating the results in many different fora, the designers of a number of courts have contacted us to ask us, where do you think the interpreter should be? They had never thought about the interpreter before. So there was no space for the interpreter. So now they're starting to think that maybe in the design of future courts, the interpreter is someone who will be a crucial element. Court practices, thinking about trials with simultaneous interpreting equipment, even if it's only for the trials, the longer trials, with 2 interpreters rather than just 1. And obviously there are always implications or applications for interpreter training. The next one is a project which Jemina and I put an application together. Jemina was the first chief investigator on the application, but then she left. So I became the first chief investigator, but we continued to collaborate. And this is a different type of research. It's not an experimental research like the other one with very strict, rigorous methods. In experimental methods. This one was more of a qualitative, but also with a mock trial. So we mounted a mock trial. We already had the contacts from the previous study in the court, so we were able to get the same courts and a lot of people on board. And as you can see here, this is outside the court with all of the participants who acted out the mock trial. So for this one, we have, again, myself and lawyers as chief investigators, and Jemina Napier and Deborah Russell as the sign language experts. And then we have partner investigators, as you can read, and an advisory group, mostly to do with law reform, with legal aid in New South Wales, departments of justice, and with policy makers. And there's a lot of interest in the results of this research because it may very possibly lead to concrete policy changes. So what were the main aims? Now, the issue with this is that this research is in response to what deaf people have been asking for. They've been asking to be participants, to be an equal citizen. They are citizens, and to have equal participation as jurors. Most people want to get out of jury duty, and that's, you know, people who have perfectly capable and allowed to be jurors. A lot of the deaf people want to be jurors, but they're not allowed to. And so we wanted to see whether it was possible for them to act as jurors with interpreters, with good interpreters. So the first aim then to assess the ability of deaf jurors to access the courtroom trial and jury deliberations via interpreters, to explore how a deaf person can participate in jury deliberations when relying on an interpreter, and examine the impact of having interpreters in the jury room, and investigate how the presence of a deaf juror impacts on the administration of justice from the perspective of all stakeholders. These aims are in response to the objections to having deaf people acting as jurors. So we wanted to see if by mounting a case, again, a mock trial based on a real case that had taken place not long ago. This one was unscripted but prepared by the lawyers who had been involved in that real case. And we had a retired judge and 2 random deaf jurors and random jury, the rest of them, the hearing jurors, actors for the witnesses. And then we had the deliberation room. Now, it's impossible to enter the deliberation room in a real situation. So this was it's a good way to analyze what goes on in a deliberation room. So they went into the real deliberation room and they deliberated. And they took it extremely serious. And afterwards we had interviews and focus groups and did content analysis. Now this is the picture of the deliberation room, and how you can see we've got the sign language interpreters facing the deaf juror, We picked one deaf juror after the trial was over, and then you can see how the deaf juror is in the middle, and all of the other hearing jurors are around them. So that was audio and video recorded. Now, these are some of the preliminary results with regards to the deliberation room. So the first question was if the deaf juror was able to participate to the same degree as the others. The next one is if the interpreters would become an active participant, because that's one of the objections, that interpreters cannot enter the deliberation room because they will become the 13th and 14th jurors, and they will participate actively and influence the decision of the jury. And if the other jurors were comfortable with the deaf juror and with the interpreters. Now I'll just show you quickly the number of turns. We can see that the deaf juror is among the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so it's the fifth one. The first one is the chair. So in terms of number of turns taken to discuss in the deliberation room. And then in terms of how long he spoke for, he's actually the second one. So he took a lot of the time of the jurors. And then when interviewing the spoken language, the hearing jurors, they said that they very soon forgot that the interpreters were there, and it's a lot easier with sign language interpreters to forget that they're there because they don't hear them, and that they trusted the interpreters. They were amazed at how good the interpreters were and how ethical they were. At one stage they asked him, "What do you think?" And they straight away said, we can't tell you what we think, we abide by a code of ethics. And they didn't ask any more after that. And so it was a very, very good experience for all of the jurors involved. So very positive response from all the other jurors. They were very comfortable with the interpreters, and the interpreters were very ethical. So this is a very important point here, that with any recommendation that we will make, we need to make sure that the interpreters are not only ethical but very competent. And in the discussions that we had afterwards with deaf people and with lawyers, this was a major issue, the lack of trust of, who will be interpreting, and whether not only the deaf juror but everybody else, or in particular from the lawyer's perspective, whether the accused will get a fair trial. So these are issues that will be discussed. So the lawyers and the administrators, they had suspicion about the interpreter's ability to accurately interpret, and not only because they were interpreters, but in addition because there were sign language interpreters. So there's this misconception that sign language is not a real language. Some of these people think that you can't interpret what is being said to the same degree of precision. Concern about trial fairness and logistical and financial implications. So that is a real concern, that if deaf people want to be jurors, then a lot of cost will be involved. But the issue is that these people are citizens, and they are demanding to be treated the same as any other citizen. So the applications, law reform, and state-based and federal reforms. And there is currently a case, this lady, Gay Lyons, who took the Queensland government to court for discrimination because she wasn't allowed to be a juror in a case where she was called for jury duty, but as soon as they realised that she needed an interpreter, they didn't allow her to participate. So we're looking forward to seeing the results of this case. The third case is a project which is very, very complex, but I'm only going to talk about the accuracy in bilingual police interviews and the difference between trained and untrained bilinguals. The original motivation for this project was, I don't know if you're aware about the police interviewing techniques, which now are very different from the coercive techniques that were being used previously. Now the main strategy used is rapport building. And so the FBI wanted to know if the same strategies in building rapport could be achieved through interpreted situations. And so that was one of the main issues that we wanted to look at. And there was a whole training package done before the interpreters even participated in this about the importance of rapport, how rapport is achieved, what sorts of strategies that the police would use, and so on, and the importance of interpreters in maintaining the rapport. Also, that package was saying to interpreters or telling them what the protocols were, that they needed to interpret everything in the first person, that if they needed any clarification, they would need to ask, and so on. So the reason why that was there was because the funders wanted to know if the interpreters needed training, if that small, short training would be enough for them to be competent. So you can see here that it's a very realistic setting. All police interviews in Australia are recorded, so that's not something that is different. And we've got 2 actors there as well, but the script was checked by the police before we used it, so they learned it. And the interpreters, although we told them in the information sheet that it was a simulated situation, a lot of people don't read information sheets, we figured, because most of them thought it was a real situation. And a lot of them got really stressed out because it was a real police situation and they needed to interpret for this real case. So the chief investigators here, again, psychologist, lawyer, and other psychologists and statistician. Now the aims, according to many other aims, but these are the main ones I want to talk about, to explore the differences in interpreter performance, including accuracy, management skills, according to interpreter understanding of role, so they were given a questionnaire before the actual interviews, according to the formal training and experience, and the physical placement of the interpreter. This is another thing that came from the US, where the preference now is, or this is what the police told us, is to put the interpreter behind the accused, or in this case the detainee, so that they don't have a conversation with each other, so that the rapport is directly with the police rather than with the interpreter. Now this is due, I believe, to the fact that they are used to working with interpreters who are not ethical and enter into conversations and side comments and so on, and so they detract from the ability of the interviewer to build rapport with the interviewee, and so the interviewer becomes excluded. Whereas we have always taught our interpreters to sit in the middle, so there's an equidistant, and that is an impartial, a visual impartial sitting, so, and also that they can see both speakers. So what was interesting, okay, I'll tell you the results later, but the methodology, experimental and discourse analytical. Now with all of this, it's a mixture of all the methods in terms of the methods of data elicitation and also analysis. So we've got so much data to analyze from different perspectives. So obviously I do the discourse analysis, the others do the quantitative statistical analyses. So we had a scripted interview with the actors and real interpreting, but the actors knew that they needed to respond according to the answers that they received. They didn't stick to the script if the interpreter didn't interpret accurately or omitted something, or the answer was not quite what they expected because of that. The interpreter really was the one who had this ability to change things, because the interviewee was also an actor. So it was video recorded, transcribed and coded, and we had 100 Spanish-speaking interpreters. So big samples, and they ranged from untrained bilinguals to highly trained interpreters with master's degrees and even PhDs, with varying degrees of experience. Now the important point here is that the bilinguals, the difference in bilingualism was non-significant. So they were, all of them had a very, very good level of bilingualism. So that wasn't an issue. So everything else was what differed. So a summary of the results. We found that the trained interpreters were more likely than bilinguals to perceive the role as neutral. This is through the first questionnaire, and a duty to interpret everything. So 89% versus 57%. That the trained interpreters scored much higher on 7 separate accuracy measures, which I'll show you in a minute, and that overall accuracy rating weighted by importance, also showed a very important difference. The trained interpreters, 71% to 47% in the marks that they got. So these were the separate accuracy measures. So propositional content was number one. This was based on the rubrics that we use to assess professional interpreters in the accreditation exam and in the courses that we teach, and especially in legal interpreting. So propositional content followed by manner of speech, in other words, maintaining the same manner of the original. So this is extremely important in legal interpreting, not in other types of interpreting, but in legal interpreting, the way in which a witness gives evidence is as important as what he or she says. So that's very important. The rapport features that needed to be maintained, and there are many different types of features that were included there. Using the correct protocol, so they introduced themselves, so that was part of the analysis, how they introduce themselves as professionals, whether they introduce the role, how they will be acting, whether they will be interpreting in the first person, explaining that they will be interpreting everything that they heard, if there was anything that they didn't want interpreted, not to say it because they're under an obligation to interpret. So setting the rules from the beginning, knowing when to interrupt, how to manage the turns, and interpreting in the first person. Then the knowledge of the legal terms. There were very specific legal terms in there that needed to be taken into account, and the legal discourse as a whole, and the turn taking, how they manage that, and the language competence, which I said before. So as a summary, the trained interpreters, I just need some water, were more likely to reproduce verbal rapport markers than bilinguals across all of those different, there were 7 types of rapport markers. This is even when we had 2 groups. Some had the training that I mentioned to you, so some had the intervention, some hadn't, and they're all mixed. So even when they had that intervention, the untrained interpreters didn't gain anything from it. They still did anything that came to mind. So they didn't follow the instructions, if you like, that they were given. Whereas the trained interpreters did everything that the training said, even if they didn't get that training, because they had already received it earlier. So that was an important thing. The trained interpreters were unaffected by position change and maintained rapport throughout the interview. This was interesting too, because the trained interpreters resisted moving position. Now, one of the police actors halfway through said, okay, we can't hear you very well, so we have to change the position. So they weren't told that they were changing positions because we wanted to assess which position was better. And one particular interpreter, who was an experienced trained interpreter, said, I can't interpret from behind. You know, I have to stay in the middle because I can't interpret from behind because I need to see everybody. But anyway, after a bit of convincing, he did sit behind them and everybody else did, and there was no difference in the accuracy. So this perception that you can't do something when in fact they were able to do it. So there was no, they weren't affected by position. The untrained bilinguals ignored half of the rapport markers, irrespective of placement, and the trained interpreters rated more. Afterwards, the actors were asked to, they didn't know what the study was about or what we were looking for, but they were asked to rate the interpreters. So they had a questionnaire to rate them, or Likert scales. They didn't know who was trained or untrained, so they had to rate them. And the trained interpreters rated more knowledgeable, more trustworthy, more confident, more likable than untrained interpreters, bilinguals, by the interviewers, the interviewer and the suspect. So that was another interesting result. So the applications, we found that the ones who had specialized legal interpreting training were superior to the ones who had so the continuum was like this: trained at university level with legal interpreting specialization were the top, followed by trained at university level without the specialization, followed by the technical college trained interpreters, followed by the ones who were accredited and experienced but without training. And then it kept going to the bilinguals. So that is an important finding because NATI, the National Accreditation Authority for Translators and Interpreters, has gone through a review, and one of the recommendations is to have specialist accreditation levels, and they have agreed to that, so that will come into force. And AUSIT, the Professional Association, is also going to align with that and have specializations, especially in legal and medical. So they are very real applications. Now, this research was funded by the US, but we use it for Australia as well, and obviously we hope that they will take on board the recommendations as well there. So, now back to the theme of the conference. How did these projects push the boundaries? So the first boundary that was pushed was the disciplinary boundary. Now, I remember when I first started researching that not only was interpreting a discipline that nobody seemed to know about. You told them interpreting, they didn't understand what it was. If you talked about interpreting in legal settings, they talked about interpreting the law. So it was a discipline that wasn't very well known, but also not a discipline once you explain what it was. Well, so what do you need to research? You know, it's simple. All you need to do is what this person says in one language, you just say it in the other language. So this lack of awareness about the complexities of interpreting that merit doing research into it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that researchers in other fields did not look at interpreting as something that was worth researching, even though we, as interpreters, we don't work in a vacuum. So an interpreter has to work with other professionals, otherwise there's no interpreting to do. So this is a very important point. And so having sociologists, criminologists, psychologists, lawyers, architects, the police, industry partners, in addition to interpreting studies experts, has been a very enriching experience for all of us. I've seen how from the beginning these colleagues had many misconceptions about interpreting, and as we worked in these projects, they started to become more and more knowledgeable about interpreting, to the point of becoming champions of interpreters. Particularly the judiciary. I mean, on the side, I also have been training the judiciary judges and magistrates for many years and using the result of my research. And I've been able to see the changes in the attitudes from judges and magistrates. One judge said to me, I'll give you a couple of anecdotes. She saw me after 10 years after I had given a workshop. And she said, you know, from that workshop, there was not only mine, there were many different sessions. She said, the only one I remember is yours. And the only one I apply consistently is how to treat interpreters. So another judge told me, you know, now when I see people treating interpreters incorrectly or not using the correct protocols and so on, I really get frustrated. So we get these champions from other powerful professions. You know, these are the judges who can help us achieve our goals. And I think since this has been happening, I can see an acceleration of the improvements to interpreter status, working conditions, and it's going a lot quicker because more people are working towards this improvement of not only the knowledge about interpreting practice, but also how that can impact on working conditions for interpreters so that they can perform better. So that has been a real asset. Not only that, researchers in other areas now are asking me to join their teams because they are now thinking about including in their research studies issues to do with interpreting and translation, which previously they had not thought about. So that's another important point. Mixed methods. There is so much benefit to using mixed methods, and not to compete with each other, but to complement each other, and to look at the data from very different perspectives, and to support the results from different perspectives. So that has been a great outcome as well. Large samples. Now we can use statistical significance to back up the claims that we figured through naturally occurring data through discourse analysis and so on, but we couldn't really replicate and we couldn't really say, well, this is the cause and this is the effect. So now we can use both in order to make much stronger claims and to also have not only one section of the research community listen to us, but many other sections of the research community as well. As I said, researchers learning from each other, raising interest, understanding and awareness about interpreting issues, and creating allies to help us achieve results, which is what I just mentioned. Okay, so in conclusion, the results that we, and there are more results, as I said, coming, but have been used to recommend policy changes, and I'm currently working on a huge project with a committee, which is the Judicial Committee for Cross-Cultural Awareness. I can't remember exactly the name, but writing rules for judges on how to work with interpreters and for interpreters on how to work in the courts, and this will be national standards that will raise the level, the status, the working conditions, and so on. So this will be a major breakthrough. Educating medical and legal practitioners on how to work effectively with interpreters. There's the medical project that I didn't talk about now. And so in conclusion, I argue that interpreting studies in this way are pushing the boundaries of their own academic and professional community into the wider community with which interpreters interact. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Sandra. Now we take some questions, comments from the floor. Anyone? No questions? No, that cannot be. This is not an option. It's because you said it all, Sandra. Okay. Okay.
Hi, and thank you. That was really interesting. And I mean, actually, the results, especially from the last study, seem a bit too beautiful to be true. The advantage of training seems to be really, really clear. So I wonder if there were some maybe other areas which you didn't talk about because they were not really significant, where bilinguals were actually had an advantage over interpreters, and also wonder whether you took experience as a factor, as, for example, between a bilingual with 20 years experience and the young graduates, would it be a difference in quality or in the end? I wonder. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that question. Yes, they are very useful results. Bilinguals, I have to say in Australia, very few bilinguals that are not accredited would be interpreting. Okay, so these bilinguals were people who maybe had helped out once with their friends or family, but they didn't call themselves interpreters. Okay, so there was a whole range. So with the experience, they didn't have much experience. Some of them had some experience, some not. With the ones who call themselves interpreters, there was that variety of the trained and untrained, and the ones with experience without experience. The ones who were just graduated from university did as well or much better at times than the ones who had not received university training or even TAFE training. So the early graduates of university did much better than the experienced ones who did not have training. So it was a major difference. Now, some of the issues that we saw in the bilinguals was that they didn't know how to manage. That was the main thing. They didn't know how to manage the situation. So the script was very difficult. It was very purposefully the Spanish speaker, the detainee, was very aggressive, and he didn't want to he wasn't very cooperative, didn't want to respond, wanted to have side conversations with the interpreter, wanted to have the interpreter as an ally. Then the police wanted to have the interpreter as an ally. So very challenging situations. The bilinguals didn't know what to do. They just omitted most of it. They started talking to one or the other. The professionals were very professional about it. They knew how to manage it, to the point of switching mode of interpreting, for example. When they started overlapping speech, they started simultaneous interpreting. So it was very smooth. Everything worked well. And obviously the two actors who didn't know anything about interpreting also saw the difference. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much for this interesting presentation, Sandra.
Please say your name.
Sorry.
Say your name.
Oh, sorry. Sabine Braun from the University of Surrey. Just to follow up on this question about experience, I was wondering, especially with your study in the police area, did you also look at the experience that the police officers had? I assume they were real police officers, right?
No.
They were not.
Actors. They were actors. But the script was written in conjunction with the police. Yeah.
Okay, no, then the question isn't better. I was wondering whether you had noticed, because I think that would also be very interesting to look at, obviously, whether you had noticed whether the experience that a police officer has in working with an interpreter, whether that had actually also influenced your role plays. And but of course it doesn't arise, not in this one.
But I have to say that we do training for the police, not me personally, but the New South Wales Police, for example, they have a training department that trains them on how to work with interpreters. So most police will know how to work with interpreters. Yeah. One at the back. One here, one at the back.
Thank you, Sandra. Henry Liu from FIT. And always an excellent presentation, Sandra, to see all the work that you've been doing, particularly in the cross-disciplinary aspect of building bridges. Following up on that question on the significance of the university-trained and with legal interpreting background, university-trained versus the non-university-trained, I assume they're all significantly different.
Yeah.
Yes. Is there a particular bridge being the widest? In other words, was university training the most significant, or was legal training the most significant? Is there a particular aspect of it being more significant than the rest?
I haven't got the actual figures here with me, but the legal interpreting training gave them the skills with regards to the legal discourse and terminology, which, you know, there were very good interpreters who didn't know how to interpret caution, for example, and so they had to stop and ask, you know, what does that mean? They knew how to manage the situation, but they didn't have that, so there was an extra layer of difficulty, yes. But it was very specifically legal, yeah. I think there was one at the back.
Brian Mossop, yeah, lige der. Godt, ja. Nej, lige der, hvor du er.
Okay. Can I ask you? Okay. Shabnam. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Okay, so you go first. No, because we have Brian. You wait a second, okay? You can't start competing, please. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Shabnam Bahadur, Mainz University. I have a methodological question. It just, I think, complements or adds to what Sabine Braun said, or maybe it's just taken from there. You just told us that you take mock and simulation situations. They are enacted situations, and you take them somehow as real situations. Do you problematize? Do you somehow reflect upon this situation of being enacted, of working with an experimental situation in your research? Is this also included? Is there a part in your research just reflecting upon this methodological situation? that would be quite interesting, because I don't think that we should only concentrate on the real life, on the field, on the empirical, but this is something maybe that should be included in the more theoretical reflections in the research. Did you do that? Was that part of the program?
That's obviously something that, you know, when we write the articles, we'll mention. I come from, all my early research is naturally occurring data. So that has informed everything else. So I have described how interpreters work in many different settings, and that has informed everything else. In addition to that, we did a lot of observations, and then replicating as much as possible a real situation. What is real here is that it's not that we're asking the interpreter to just interpret one segment or one text and so on. It's a real interview, because they had to do the interpreting of an interview. In the court, it had nothing to do with it, because that was a scripted interpreting situation. So that was a different thing. It was to look at the effect of the interpretation on the evaluation of the witnesses. But in this case, if we want to analyze specific factors, then we need to be able to replicate it 100 times with 100 interpreters. There is no way that we can get naturally occurring data with exactly the same interview with 100 interpreters. So that's the best next thing. Yeah.
Brian, you have the mic, right?
Brian Mossop from Toronto, Canada. Has any of your research concerned the gender of the interpreter? For example, if a male suspect is being interviewed by a woman police officer, does it make a difference whether the interpreter is a man or a woman?
No, but that's one that we have thought about, because especially with the results of the first study that I mentioned, where the accused was viewed as more likable and everything more positive, because they saw the interpreter through we don't know exactly why, but through the consecutive interpretation. And it may be that it's because it's a female as opposed to a male. So that's another research question that we have thought about that is very worth looking into. Yeah, thank you. The lady at the
One last comment or
Sorry.
question.
Sorry, because I think I was the sort of source of the previous question. I would like to second what Sandra was saying. I think for this type of research, it doesn't also really matter that it is a role play. In addition to what you have said, Sandra, I also think it was comparative. You wanted to see what's the comparison. So basically what you are measuring is only the difference between the trained and the untrained bilingual. So, and what the other people are doing is then not so. I mean, my question wasn't intended as criticizing whether or not. I was simply curious whether you had any insights in that. But I think there is a very good place for this comparative experimental research for replication purposes, and I think we have to be careful that we don't sort of throw out the baby with the bath here and saying this kind of experimental research can very well be valid in this particular case.
And that's why I argue that we have to use all methods. And the research question will determine the methods. So, you know, if we want to compare across, then we need to do experimental. If we want to describe what happens, then we do the naturally occurring. Yeah.
That was a good last point, wasn't it? Yes, let us definitely. Thank you very much, Sandra. Could we will proceed. Thank you very much. Sandra, you will stay up here, please. Andrew, can you come up here, please? Sharon, where are you? Sharon, can I have you up here? Thank you. Karen? Okay, we'll just, we'll give you 1 second and then just proceed directly to the closing session. Finder du min slide? Det er bare simpelthen alle tiders. Det er så godt, Karen. Det er så godt. Kan du det? Jo, det er det sådan set. Jo, det er det. Og ved du hvad, det siger jeg faktisk også. Men det vil jeg så gøre ikke. Eller også gør ikke, eller også whatever. Okay, wow. Okay, may I have your attention again, please? May I have your attention? Could I ask you to perhaps sit down again? We will, as I said, proceed directly to the closing session. You're probably all tired, so we have opted for a short session, beginning with the announcement of the winner of the Best Poster Award, which is sponsored by John Benjamins. The chair of the scientific committee, Karen Koning-Setzen, will announce the winner. Karen, we are looking forward to that. The floor is yours.
Right, so it's my great pleasure to announce that, well, first of all, 124 participant votes were cast, which I think is quite impressive for the first Best Poster Award we've ever had at an EST Congress. So 124 votes, and I'm happy to announce that the poster that received most votes was produced by Laura Iwaska. Is Laura here? Where is she? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, they got her. Come here, Laura. I can say that Laura is from the University of Turku in Finland, and you produced a poster with the rather specific title of Indirect Translations of Modern Greek Prose Literature into Finnish from 1952 to 2004. And the Best Poster Award has kindly been sponsored by John Benjamin's publishing company, and it is a book grant to the amount of €700. So congratulations.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you.
And this is a small.
Thank
So,
you.
yes, congratulations to Laura.
Thank you all. Thank you.
That is great. Congratulations, Laura. That was very well done. Okay. And now we'll go to the next item on the agenda, impressions and highlights from the Aarhus Congress as seen by our keynote speakers. We will just present them in the order in which they have given their speeches, beginning with Andrew Chesterman. Andrew, would you come up here, please? You have a deep, big voice, so you can.
Can I say all that? Do I do the important bits or the not important bits first?
The important bits, so in case you.
Case.
In the middle of everything, then.
Well, okay, here goes. My first impression that I will carry away from this conference is the red T-shirts. I have been really impressed by your friendliness. You're always in the right place, on the corner of some building where I'm trying to find some room somewhere. And when I go down the wrong corner, you come along politely and say, no, actually, it's not that way. And I think you've been just great. Thank you very much. And then I think I must follow Mr. Bean. And I would say that my second impression of this conference is it's big. Some of you will know the film that I'm referring to. It's really huge. And this has, on the one hand, been a source of tremendous richness and variety. On the other hand, for me at least, it's been a source of a bit of frustration. As you know, I'm well known for my statistical, quantitative, mathematical contribution to empirical science. And I have carefully worked out that I have actually, although I have been to every possible session that I can be at, I have actually attended 11% of the total of 63 panel sessions, even jumping one panel to another occasionally. And I feel as if I've only scratched the surface of this conference, and I think that's a feeling that many people must have. I've come across some wonderful papers, some of them by serendipity, interestingly enough, because I come along to one which I've marked that I want to hear, and I'm a bit early or a bit late, and there's another one going on, and I think, geez, that's actually really interesting, and I get carried away into something quite different that I hadn't prepared for, which is very nice, very good. I'm not too keen on speed presentations. For anybody over 25, it's quite hard to keep up. And if you're actually presenting, it must be pretty hard to realize that you've got 50 slides to go and 2.5 seconds. It's maybe not always an optimal solution, I think. I do go for the posters. I've seen some great posters. I was especially struck by the one that didn't win, but I really liked it, the one dealing with what was the one image that you would put on Wikipedia if you had to choose an image for an article on translation. I thought that was really nice. I got stuck on that for a long time.
It was one of the runner-up.
Oh, was it? Well, I liked it. I like it. That's, I don't know, I probably shouldn't mention names, but I really did like that one. Otherwise, I've got to say I really like that presentation and that one and that one. And perhaps I shouldn't do that. On a slightly more serious note, have I got another half an hour or so? 2 minutes. Oh, here we go again. So the speed presentation. It's a great theme. Moving boundaries is a really good theme because it can be interpreted in so many ways. It's so topical in many ways, which has come out, immigration and goodness knows what else. I think it's a wonderful theme. And I challenge Stellenbosch to come up with something as good. That will be quite an interesting challenge. I'm trained as a linguist, and I came into translation studies as a linguist, and I noticed that there's a great absence of linguistics, at least in the 11% that I tasted. Linguistics seems to be, oh, so last Thursday, as they say, if you're under 25, apparently. There must have been some, but it's a very striking indication of how translation studies has moved in the last 30 or 40 years away from its core. We're now all going cultural and social and increasingly political. I was surprised how many of the events I went to here have brought in a political aspect to translation studies, politics and policy and things like this. Just two more small things. I'm also impressed that a great many of the papers that I listen to have a kind of underlying implicit interest in quality. Quality used to be a bit of a no-no in the days of descriptive translation studies. But it's coming in back, I think, kind of creeping in, you know, a bit under the carpet, if that's the correct, that can't be the correct English metaphor. You can imagine it coming in somehow. Because a great many people are motivated not just by improving the translator's working conditions or improving the quality of a translation, but also improving life, social life more generally, and such like, which I thought was maybe that's something that will come back. I don't know. It obviously answers questions about social relevance. What are we all here for? Well, we're trying to make life better in some way. Better machines, better use of technology, better ways of dealing with technology, and a great many other betters and betters and betters. We're all becoming cyborgs, I suppose, a bit. But to end on a really serious note, one thing I shall remember is ambulatory because I had a long argument about it with Hale. And actually, I've spent a good deal of time Googling, and it still seems to me to be a strange word. This is where we had that meal last night. We were in the ambulatory, or ambulatory, sorry. It still puzzles me. I shall remember it. And of course, I shall also remember, as I'm sure all of you will remember who were there last night, 39%.
Okay, I'm not going to take very much time because I know everybody's really exhausted and tired after such a long number of days. But I do want to start just by saying thank you so much to the conference organizers for a really wonderful conference. Please join me in thanking them. It's actually impossible to select highlights because of what Andrew just pointed out, that we haven't really attended everything. So it would be really unfair to say this was a highlight or that was a highlight. So I'm going to give you some very scattered impressions of my experience of the conference. The first thing I would say is that I saw some great speed presentations. So they can be done brilliantly, and they opened up a lot of time for discussion, which was really good. So there's a good way of doing the speed presentations, I think. Because I couldn't pick highlights, I've been talking to people about what they thought were the highlights or what they're taking away from the conference. So one of the things that comes back again and again is how big the area of translation studies has become. So if you look at all of the themes, we've had things on religion, we've had things on media, on technology, on sociology, and so on. So it's really, really big. Something that keeps coming back in the comments that I got from people is how we're collectively very interested in a lot more than text and language. So I want to just give you a number of the phrases that people gave to me in terms of what they thought was really interesting. So the ecosystem of the translator and translation, the socio-technical system, the relevance of translation to society as a whole, translation and its impact on social quality, and translation and social inclusion. So these are some of the keywords that people gave to me as being really a highlight or something that was very, very important to them. I want to just finish off by picking up on what Sandra said towards the end of her talk, where she demonstrated that the research that they've been doing has been pushing boundaries and opening up interpreting so that it's understood in many other domains. And just a little anecdote about my experience. Recently, I was in a large gathering of academics from Irish universities. And people were introducing themselves and saying what field they came from. So we had people from engineering, from nursing, from social science, from psychology, from language and literature, and then translation studies. And when you said, I'm from translation studies, you could see a complete blank look on all of the faces. So then they ask you, well, what do? You teach language, or you teach linguistics, or what is it that you do? And you try to explain, and then you can see the cogs turning again. They're thinking, there's a whole discipline for that. Yeah. So maybe community interpreting has managed to push itself out there and to be recognized for its importance, but I think that we still have a very significant job to do in relation to translation studies. We have a very rich field, but we have also huge challenges ahead of us, so let's keep working on that. Thank you all very much.
I will not say too much. I had prepared a number of slides, but I'm not going to share them. Now, I say ditto to everything that Andrew and Sharon have said, and I have really enjoyed mingling with so many people, getting to know new people, and meeting older, not old as in age, but people I've known for a long time. And I'm really appreciative of Andrew's ability to guide me so that I wouldn't get lost in the city, so that was very useful. But I think one thing that I like to stress or to highlight is that I tried to go to most of the interpreting sessions, and I managed to select the positives of the different presentations about interpreting. And so some of the positives that I was able to hear was, for example, that community interpreters in a big survey consider that the work is very valuable, that it has very strong social value. And I think that's a very important thing. That the younger generation are optimistic, more optimistic than the older generation about the future of interpreting and of their career. That the graduates of universities find that the training has been very useful and that they appreciate what they've learned in the training. So I think through all of these results, I've been able to see a number of the misconceptions or myths, or some maybe not so, but that have been around for a long time, that there's no relevance to theory, that there's no link between the practice and what you learn at the university, that there's no hope for interpreters, the working conditions are appalling. And so that's not what I heard. Some of that has been said, but I chose not to highlight that. I like to highlight the positive because I think that that's the only way that we can keep going. If we highlight on the small wins, on the small battles that we win, then we have energy to keep battling, to keep fighting, to keep going, and we will see slowly the changes that will lead to improvements. And I know, I've seen this in the work that I've been doing, and I know that if we all look at the positives, we can go a lot further. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You just have to sit down, Hale, because Andrew has a poem he would like to read.
No, but can I close first?
No, you cannot, because
I want to finish. I want to finish.
This is cheating, but because I get an extra go. But I think this conference has been so extraordinary that it should be celebrated in a work of literature. And I have spent my nights composing a brief poem, a limerick, in honor of our hosts. You know a limerick, I'm sure, with the rhyme scheme A, B, B, A. And I invite you to join in with the last word of the fourth line, which you may be able to predict. Are you concentrating? I was challenged at first by trying to find a rhyme for the city in which we are. And I have solved this problem in using the multi-languaging strategy. There is a great group in Aarhus who set up a conference whose theme was the best, because it was EST. Come on, all together now. EST. And no one went home with the blues. I think we should give a big applause to our organizers, really, once again. Hooray!
Okay, thank you very much. This is just so Andrew. But, you know, well, I should have been before you, because I was going to thank the rest of you, you know. I know you're tired, we're really at the end and all, but there are a few things that I need to say. Well, so now I'm at the acknowledgements and credits. Well, there are so many people that I'd like to thank that it's been almost impossible to decide where to start and where to stop. Well, I tried to stop. But to take it chronologically, I'll start by thanking the previous EST, President and Board, Anthony, Alexandra, Ucha, Isabel, Ivona, Carol, Michael, and Kiriaki. Most of you decided to make Aarhus the venue of the EST Congress, and all of you afterwards helped planning it. So thank you very much. Our keynote speakers, you were next. Actually, it's 2 years ago I started corresponding with you. Andrew, Sharon, and Sandra, you all did so wonderful, so thank you very much. Our scientific committee, the many members, they scrutinized, assessed, and rated almost 600 submissions. So thank you very much for your work. It has been voluntary, unpaid, and still excellent, so professional still. I actually want to mention them. It's It's Henrik Gottlieb, Kajsa Koskinen, Birgitta Englund Dimitrova, Hanna Risko, Klaus Schubert, Franz Pöschacker, Daniel Schiel, Christina Schäffner, Nike, and Jemina Napier, Brian Baer, Michael Cronin, Christina Abdallah, Helle Dam Jensen, Carmen Daniela Meyer, and not least the steering committee, Anne Scholler. Is Anne here? Anne is here. Martin. Is Martin here? Is Martin not here? Where is he? Oh, he is up there. Look up there. Without him, there would be no program. There would just not be a program. He has been so wonderful. So, Karen Koningsetsen, you were the chair. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay. Also, all the people and organizations that have supported the Congress financially. As I said, when I opened, the Congress has many sponsors. They're all on the Congress website, basically. But at this point, I wish to mention just a few important ones. So first of all, the main conference sponsor, Kommunikation and Sprog. I mentioned you already at the very opening. You're here, Jørgen. Per, has he gone home? We also had substantial grants from the Danish Research Council and the Hedor's Foundation, and well, many more. So it has been really good to be able to operate a low enough conference fee to enable many scholars to attend the Congress. Then I also want to thank all my co-organizers, so I'll just mention them. It's Karen, Jan, Anja, Anne, Carmen 1 and Carmen 2, the other Helle. Well, I'm the first Helle, and then there's the other Helle. Marian, Mathilde, Martin, Tina, Katrine, Christine, and also Kasper. The administrative team, that was too many words, well, or syllables. Vibeke, are you here? Vibeke, are you here? Yes, Vibeke. Signe, also. and Sophie, and Anita. And Thomas, he's probably doing the streaming now, but actually he is our streaming guy, and he did all the online voting and stuff, and he has been really, really great. So, and then I also wanted to, of course, mention our red t-shirts, but you already did that, but I think you did really, really well. So, so I just want to thank you all for working with me, with us. It's been great to working with you. And it's also, I think, perhaps a tiny bit nice that we are now at the end. Then I also want to thank all of you out there in the auditorium. You decided to attend the EST Congress, so thank you very much for coming all the way to Aarhus. We know it's not the center of the world. It's for us, it is the center of the world, but not to you, of course. So you all contributed to making this Congress a milestone, I think, in translation studies history, and an unforgettable event altogether. So safe trip home, and make sure to come back. You're free to go, actually.